Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. First of all, I'd like to thank the Knights of Columbus for putting on this fundraiser for a very worthy cause in support of life. And secondly, I'd like to thank you for your prayers and your financial help in this fundraiser. I've been given an opportunity to say a few words this evening, and I've decided to talk a little bit about my high school years. Now, I took my high school at Outlook, Saskatchewan, about 100 kilometers southwest of here. It's a agricultural area, farming community, and the people are good, down-to-earth, hard-working people. A lot of city folk refer to the people out around Outlook as being rednecks because there's no gray area with the rednecks. It's either black or white. For example, if you were to ask the average farmer around Outlook of what the largest group of fossils was, he would say it's our Canadian Senate, not the fossils at Drumheller. And he might also say, we feel that senators should be appointed for 2 terms, one in office and one in jail. So that gives you an idea of the background I came from. Now, we were bused into high school, and I became friends with a fellow that lived in town. His name was Billy. He was a year older than me, and he showed me the ropes around town. And on weekends, if my dad didn't need me on the farm, I would take my bike into town, and Billy and I would pick bottles. You only got about a penny or 2 a bottle, but it provided us with spending money. Billy got older. He got his learner's license. Then he got his driver's license. Then his dad co-signed a loan for him to get a chick magnet, which is just a fancy car. And Billy went out with his dad, and they bought a 56 Ford 2-door hardtop. Beautiful looking car. 390 motor. Anyway, Billy loved that car dearly. Now, Billy didn't need a chick magnet. The girls liked Billy because he was a good-looking fellow and well-mannered. I never heard Billy talk rough at all. In fact, he used to say to me, "Joe, you treat a girl like a thoroughbred, and she'll never be a nag." And so having a good friend like that was a big plus in high school. And when Billy would go to a movie or something and ask a girl out, he would ask me if I wanted to come along. And sometimes she would have a sister or a friend, and then I'd have a partner to go to the movie. Billy's dad kept that car running like a top. His dad was a mechanic. He worked for the Department of Highways. He drove a gravel truck, but he was also a good mechanic. And he had a garage full of tools. Most of Billy's dad's tools were orange because he worked for the Department of Highways. But he was a good man in keeping his son's car going, and later my cars as I got cars. Now, I want to tell you a story about Billy that shows you his tremendous sense of justice. Billy had this car with a 390 motor. It was kind of thirsty, and he had car payments. So when school was out in June, he went down to the dam, and he got a job driving a Euclid because he looked to be 18, 19 years old. Now, driving a Euclid paid very well. Minimum wage then was about $1 an hour. If you drove a Euclid, you got $3.50 an hour or more. And so Billy was making good money. The only drawback was you had to stay down at the dam in camp for 2 weeks and then come back for a week. Now, because Outlook was growing, they built new subdivisions. The people from the dam were living there. And one afternoon, town council passed a law to move the speed limit sign out of town another quarter mile because the new subdivisions, they thought, should be given that kind of level of protection against speeding cars. So they did this. And for 3 or 4 days, the police gave out warning tickets. Then they started giving out real tickets. Well, sure enough, Billy was down at the dam when this law was made, and he came back one night just cruising into town, and he thought he didn't have to apply the brakes till he got up by the New Holland dealership. But boom, the policeman was flashing the lights. They got him in radar. And Billy said, well, this sign wasn't here before. It was over by the New Holland dealer. And the policeman said, oh, it's been moved for over a week and a half. And he was a hard-nosed policeman, and he gave him a ticket. So Billy was thoroughly disgruntled. And as luck would have it, the circuit judge was coming to Outlook that week. So Billy went to court and was going to fight it. And he pleaded his case and made a very good logical argument. And the judge was a cold-hearted creature, and he fined Billy $40. So, being a real redneck, Billy had a plan. He left the courthouse right after he paid his $40. He went to the shoe store, and he bought a pair of new runners. Then he went home, and he set his alarm for 3 in the morning, 3 a.m. 3 a.m. came, Billy got up, put on his new runners. He went and got his old runners. He also got a teddy bear that his mother was going to give to the Salvation Army. And he got a sheet of foolscap, and he wrote a note on it. And he loaded all this stuff up. Then he went down to the river. He got on the bridge, and halfway on the bridge, he stopped, and he put his runners by the guardrail. And in one runner, he put the teddy bear. In another runner, he put the note. Now, the note said, I can't take it anymore. And then Billy turned around and went back to town, and he went to the one and only payphone that we had in town by the co-op, and he phoned the police station. He didn't want them to be able to trace the call to their home number. So he phoned the police station, and he said, I just drove over the river bridge, and there was a fellow walking on the guardrail. You might want to go down and check that out. So in the morning, Billy woke up about 9:30, had breakfast, then he got in his car and he went down to the river. And sure enough, there was the water rescue unit, and they were setting up equipment to dredge the river, and they dredged that river for 2 days before they quit. And Billy thought, well, I think dredging the river for 2 days cost them about as much as the $40 ticket cost me. And he was very satisfied. So you get an idea of the background that I came from. Now, we had a lot of strong, well-built farm boys. And they wouldn't have had to go to school because they were going to farm anyway. But they went to school for a number of reasons. One was sports. One was friendship. But they particularly liked sports, especially football. Now, we had big boys, as I say. They were quite commonly 240 pounds. In fact, one of the fellas looked it up, and at one point in grade 11 or 12, I can't remember which, our front four weighed about 15 pounds more than the Rough Riders' front four. So we were big. And we also made up a little pact that we would not shave from the first week in September until after provincial playoffs, when we either won or lost. So besides having a good set of players, we had a good coach. He was a big man as well and had a robust voice, and he commanded respect. He had played 2 years with the Regina Rams, and then he got a job teaching out at Outlook, teaching phys ed. And I remember he called us into the gym the first day, and he said, men, I want you to remember 2 things. The first one is, football is not a contact sport. Football is a collision sport. Dancing is a contact sport. And secondly, I am going to teach you how to knock the daylights out of a person in a Christian way. I don't want you putting people in the hospital. And then he took us out into the field, and he worked the daylights out of us. And our team was actually dreaded by other schools. I felt sorry for some other schools that had a smaller team. They would often phone the day before the game and say, we have to default the game, and they made up some excuse that the boys had to help the parents on the farm with harvest, or that the flu bug was going through town. Anyway, we did get enough games in, and then we got into playoffs in the province, and we did very well. And we also had a secret weapon. That secret weapon was called Buddha. Now, Buddha was a lovable kid in grade 12. He was about 6'2", and he weighed 350 pounds. I said 350 pounds. He was a large boy. And Buddha's mother often joked and said, Buddha is big for two reasons. Number one, Buddha was big when he was little. Number two, she owned the ice cream parlor in town. And Buddha helped her on weekends and after school. And of course, he had a dish of all the new flavors that came in. Buddha had kind of a philosophy that you should never eat on an empty stomach. But the coach loved Buddha, and he didn't make him do all the drills that the rest of us sweat through. He just said, you do what you can and keep trying to improve. In fact, he often joked with Buddha. He said, Buddha, if I put you in a race against a woman that was 9 months pregnant, you'd come in third. You've got to try to run a little faster. So Buddha and the quarterback had a deal going. The quarterback said the ball will be snapped on 3, on the third number. So on the first number, you start running. And he would put Buddha about 5 yards behind him. And he'd say 2, and then Buddha would start running 4, 6, and then the snap came. He'd hand it to Buddha, and Buddha would go trudging through the line of scrimmage and on towards the goal line, and he'd usually make it over the goal line, dragging a minimum of 2 of the opponents. And then, of course, we'd carry Buddha off the field, and everybody would cheer. It was a fun time. And everybody associated with the team had nicknames. I've told you about Buddha. His real name was Kenny. And then there was Broken Nose. There was Toothless. And there was Limpy. And those were just the cheerleaders. There was a motley crew, I'll tell you. And our principal was a tough dude as well. He wasn't a very big man, but you knew you didn't mess with Mr. Bose. I was never in his office, but those that were said he had a large paperweight, about 1.5 feet long, and a nice brass inlaid insert in it with some Latin words. And those Latin words were, ne humanum avoidum buggerum carborundum, which I found out later meant, in English, don't let the buggers grind you down. So he was a good man, got us through our high school, and generally it was a very good time. I don't want to have you think it's just the administration and the football coach that made men out of us. We also had some good teachers. And one in particular I want to take a minute to tell you about was our history teacher, Mr. Wilms. Now, I had 2 history teachers in high school. The first one, for grade 9 and 10, was boring. It was like watching paint dry. The second one was Mr. Wilms, and he was the other extreme. He bent over backwards to make it interesting. Now, there's a fine line between making something interesting and scrambling a student's mind. Now, for Mr. Wilms, this line was fuzzy or blurry or didn't exist. I'll give you an example. When teaching about Napoleon and the Battle of Waterloo, he said, it is known and accepted by historians that Napoleon did not fight in the Battle of Waterloo. He usually rode his horseback and led the charge and did well in every battle. In the Battle of Waterloo, it was a disaster. They got beat badly. Now, there are various schools of thought as to why Napoleon didn't lead his charge into the Battle of Waterloo. And one was that he had a severe case of hemorrhoids. Well, you can imagine in grade 12 to hear that from a teacher. You took note. And he would even test us on this, on tests. I remember the multiple choice question. He said, Napoleon did not fight in the Battle of Waterloo. A, because he had adenoids. B, because he used steroids. C, because he had hemorrhoids. D, all of the above. Now you can imagine if a student got that wrong, the ridicule they endured when we took the exam up in class. And he would also slip little questions on the test to make sure anybody that played hooky or was daydreaming paid the price. For example, one I remember was on a true and false test. He said, true or false? Paprika is a third world country. And he would always catch a few students, and they would be the subject of ridicule. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for being able to share this with you. And I want to tell you, in thinking about this little talk, I came to realize how important it is to interact with people and how you influence them and how they influence you. And sadly, we often lose friends. I've lost many. In fact, only about 60-some% of our grade 12 class is still with us. But I want you to remember the famous words, I believe it was Fulton Sheen, who said, no two Christians ever meet for the last time. Thank you, and have a good evening.